Hello, my name is Jason, and I'm the Game Master. I cover everything Pathfinder 2nd Edition, including in-depth adventure path reviews, advice for players, and tips on how to hit the elite template on your GMing. I am also a professional game master, so if you'd like to play a game with me, check me out at startplaying.com or at my Discord. Links to both are below. Welcome back to our look at some of the best consumable items for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Finding the perfect item is tough in a system with like 11 bajillion of them, and a lot of them are pretty niche as well. I'm giving you the lowdown on the ones that I think are worth taking a look at, no matter what game you're playing. As always, I'm only covering things that are in common rarity and aren't strictly found at adventure paths because I wanted to highlight items that you're most likely going to be able to find in your own game. I'm also not including things like poisons or bombs because those are kind of like their own category of thing for me. That all said, let's get down to it. Level 7 starts off with Murderer's Knot. This is a nice all-round item, but it's especially good for you rogues out there. For a free action on a hit versus an off-guard creature, you can give them a 1d6 persistent bleed damage. And if you have the Twist the Knife feat, the bleed damage is actually equal to your sneak attack damage. That's a big upgrade from normal Twist the Knife because as the bleed damage is normally just your sneak attack die. The creature is then off guard until the bleeding stops, which helps out the entire party. Free damage and the application of a condition is just a pure W all the way across the board. PF2E is a game that highly encourages teamwork, and to succeed in this and to give them off guard to everybody for potentially several rounds, leading to extra crits on top of that, extra hits and extra crits potentially that wouldn't happen otherwise, is a very powerful thing to have in your back pocket. Energy Breath Potion is the answer to the old question of what to do with your third action. After drinking this potion, for the next hour you can activate either a 15-foot cone or a 30-foot line energy attack. The type of energy in attack is based off of what kind of a potion you purchased. Regardless of that, it's going to do 4d6 damage of the energy type that you selected, and the DC is 23 for the save. The kind of save depends on, again, which one you actually picked. Spellcasters who aren't casting shield for whatever reason would probably find this pretty handy. As aside from shield, they can struggle sometimes with third actions. This is another way to trigger weaknesses as well. Most of the saves are reflex, which I feel is good because this could just be my perception, but it seems like most creatures, if they're going to have, like their lowest save is most commonly going to be reflex. I know that's not true across the board, but I feel like it's true most of the time. I could be wrong about that though. This can help target flying creatures for those who didn't take reach weapons or ranged weapons, which can be a pretty frustrating situation for those players. If you're an imaginative GM and you're looking for something to homebrew, I feel there's space here for different variants of the spell that are including like sonic damage, spirit damage, force damage, something like that. That probably costs a little bit more, be of a higher level, but I think that wouldn't be a crazy thing. This item mainly grants you flexibility, like most of them on this list, especially if you've done some recall knowledge checks and you know if a creature has a weakness to a certain type of energy. Ensnaring Disc is a talisman that you can affix to your shield. If you are attacked by a weapon and then shield block, for a free action you can then activate this and attempt a disarm check with a +2 to the roll. Disarm became an actual useful thing to do since the remaster. I find myself forgetting about it too, so look at it again if you haven't in a while. Reducing its attack and forcing it to waste an action to adjust its grip it's a nice bonus because every action it's spending to do that kind of stuff is an action it's not using to try and kill you. Keep in mind the language says interacting to change the grip, which means that it would trigger reactive strikes and things like that. As with a lot of things, the devil is in the details with PF2E. Talismans get a bad rap to some folks, but I think that they can be useful in the right situations if you have the spare coin to spend on them. The blinded condition doesn't come up that often, which is kind of surprising because it is very powerful, probably because the blind spell has the incapacitate trait, which makes it tough to land. I've run some pretty high-level combats, though. I've run Bloodlords all the way through, and I'm currently running Kingmaker. So I've played high-level games. But even as top levels, it's just not something that comes up all that much. When it does come up, though, it's crippling. Being able to being reduced to imprecise senses means like hearing and that kind of stuff means that everything's hidden to you, and you're going to have to succeed on a DC 11 flat check to target or hit anything, and that sucks. With Emergency Eye, though, you're not worried about that. If you get blinded, you can use a free action to use Emergency Eye and just be able to look through this monster's eye just like it was your own. Free actions have triggers just like reactions, so it doesn't matter if it's not your turn or anything like that. Even if it happens off turn for you, you don't have to wait for your turn to come up before you can trigger this. So you can just do it just like a reaction. The language here says that you can use it whenever you become blinded or if an effect would impede your vision. So I would say that would probably help with Dazzled too. As I said before, these kinds of talismans, and really most of these items I'm talking about, are like insurance policies. You hope you don't need them, but if you do, you're very glad you had them. Hovering Potion is the solution to a problem that you may or may not have. If you fully transferred over to the remaster rules and you're not using any of the old spells, you're not going to have access to Airwalk. Airwalk is basically better Fly. Fly kind of sucks, if you want my opinion. I don't like it that much. The continuous action tax to stay in the air by using fly actions, which then triggers reactive strikes, means that it's still a move action even if you don't go anywhere. So for a spellcaster, which are, if you're a GM like me, most of the time the people who are going to be using this are spellcasters, and it's really tough on them. Most of the time, I just switch out Fly for Airwalk when I'm running a spellcaster just to make them feel like they're working the way that they should. But Airwalk isn't in the core rules. So if you're only using the core rules, take a look at the Hovering Potion. Like Airwalk, you don't need to spend an action to stay in the air, but your action is going to be a lot slower than Airwalk. You can only move 10 feet up or down unless you succeed a climb check. Climb checks are based off of the simple DC chart, and I would just use the untrained one, because if a player, uses potion and they spent the money on it, it's not going to feel too good for them to, for me to be hard on them after that. So I would just give them the simple DC, the easy one. Moving horizontal is at half speed, so there's a lot of restrictions here, but saving the action costs of not incurring reactive strikes is definitely going to be worth it. Level 8 starts off with a delicious beer. Cayden's Brew is both hilarious and devastating. This delicious ale has a lot of great effects. For an hour after you drink it, you get a +1 item bonus to saves against fear effects, which are pretty common. A lot of monsters have like a fear aura around them. And you can use a single action to expel a massive burp in a 15-foot cone, and any creature in the cone needs to make a DC 25 fort save. You can repeat this burp every 1d4 rounds. On a success, they're clumsy and stupefied for 1 round. On a failure, it's 1d4 rounds. And on a critical failure, it's clumsy 2, stupefied 2, and sickened 1. And the clumsy and the stupefied last 1d4 rounds after the sickened ends. That is brutal. Lasting for an hour, that means that you can pre-buff before a fight as well. This is one of the strongest consumables that I've seen so far. There is literally no downside to this, and it's not even one-time use, the burp effect. So potentially this could even last multiple combats. 80 gold is not necessarily cheap, but if this brew shuts down one big spell or turns one crit into a regular hit, in my mind, that's already worth the money. Potion of Shared Life lets you spread the pain around the party if you feel like one person is just a little too squishy. Basically, if 2 willing creatures both drink half of this potion, they can use a reaction to divide any incoming damage between them. I can see a use for this between like a really squishy spellcaster and like a champion or someone else that just has a lot of hit points to spare. Nobody wants to take damage, but this does provide a lot of survivability to both characters, and as long as they're healing semi-regularly, this could be really powerful in the right situation. My mind, of course, also goes to what the GM could do with this. You could homebrew up like a non-consensual version of this, and then have the bad guy feed this to a hostage. Now, everything that the party does to defeat the bad guy is also hurting the hostage as well, and they got to figure out how to deal with this. In general, though, I can see that this spell being this item being somewhat of a hard sell because obviously taking damage is bad. But if anything reinforces that PF2E is a game, it's a system that emphasizes teamwork over individuality, this is it. The red version of the Spun Cloud item is a massively upgraded fear spell. Fear is a very powerful, and I'm always a little bit surprised that I don't see more people take it, honestly. This item lets you exhale a 20-foot cloud within 60 feet of you, forcing the creatures inside of it to make a DC 24 will save, or be frightened 2 on a failure, frightened 3 on a critical failure. The cloud persists for 1 minute, and so this gives you a nice degree of area control with the spell. This is a really good choice for your first round attack if you can get it off. Get it in early, and then that way, if everyone's positioned correctly, you're making it really difficult to get to some PCs. If a monster has to go through the cloud and to get to somebody else, or use a less effective ranged attack, or waste time pathing around it, that's all time bought for your party. This is a fear, emotion, and mental effect, but nothing says that the creature actually needs to breathe this in. So it would still work against undead as long as they're susceptible to the other traits in this. Like mindless undead, no, but the other things, yes. I think that the ability to cause fear, block off areas, and force creatures to move either away from or into the areas that you kind of like want them to, what makes this an extremely powerful item. Quenching Potion can be the answer to one of the most lethal things in the game, persistent damage. This potion allows you to make an immediate flat check against persistent acid, fire, void, or poison damage on you, plus making a saving throw against any poisons that you might currently be suffering from. While this doesn't affect sickened, the ability to pour it on yourself and not necessarily needing to drink it, meaning that you can still use it even if you are sickened, since you don't need to ingest it. I think that the description here only refers to a person using it on themselves, but I think this is perfectly reasonable to allow one PC to use it on another. Persistent damage on downed characters is extremely lethal, and while there are actions you can take like to assist PCs with these conditions, the record of success for things like treat poison and administer first aid is spotty at best. All the rolls that you can get to clear these conditions can make the difference between life and death for your character. If you need everybody around you to be off guard, and you need them to be off guard right now, check out the Jade Bauble. This talisman is pretty straightforward. Once activated, it makes everyone within range of your weapon off guard. Perfect for any melee fighter with a reach weapon especially, who's storming in battle face first. Rogues as well, of course. This is an easy way to get off your sneak attacks. Not having any checks and there's no stipulations about the types of foes, their size, anything like that. It just works on every creature, regardless of anything else. It's a very simple item and it just works, so that's kind of it. Level 9 starts off with Storm Breath, and this is another way to replicate a spell for those who may not have the ability to cast it. On top of getting resistance 5 to electricity and sonic damage, you get to use a baby version of Lightning Bolt. The damage is still the same, it's 4d12, but the line is only 30 feet long instead of 120, but that's still long enough for most applications that I've seen. As with all of these bottled breath items, they do require you to hold your breath after you drink it, giving you a chance to try out those suffocation rules. Keep in mind that you're not going to be able to really talk after you take one of these either. Taking damage After this is also going to be causing you to lose rounds off of your breath, so you can't hold on to this forever. I find situations where this can be useful is like really small hallways or rooms, like dungeons. It's not hard to get like 3 people in a line, which is sort of what you're looking for, at least with these area spells in a perfect world. So games like Abomination Vaults are perfect for these kinds of spells. Reflex saves, I think, are always a good choice when you're up against the big brute creature that hits like a truck, because they got real great fort saves most of the time, but the reflex, not so much. For some reason, I find rolling a 12 on a D12 to be almost as satisfying as rolling a natural 20. D12s are really swingy dice. Sometimes you roll garbage and it feels pretty crappy, but boy, when you hit that 12, it's just wonderful. Another Spun cloud that you can get a hold of at this level is the green version, which you inhale like the rest and can hold on to for as long as you can hold your breath. This one, same as the others, allows you to exhale this cloud in a 20-foot radius within 60 feet of you. It's the same radius as a fireball. The creatures inside of it need to make a DC 25 fort save, and on a fail, they're sickened 1, sickened 2 on a critical failure. Sickened is one of my favorite conditions because it's so difficult to get rid of, costing an action to even make the attempt to get rid of it. Most people, in my experience, just ride it out. I do wish there was like an upgraded version of some of these spells with like a higher, like an upgraded DC, but it is what it is. It does affect all creatures within the area, so be careful where you lay this one down. You'll want to catch your party members in this. Using one of these to fill up a room, posting the magic users and the ranged characters on like the far side, and then the melee fighters on either side of the door, it could be a pretty great combo. As with all complicated plans, those rarely work, but it's a great thing in theory. Watchful Portrait is a bit different than a lot of these items on this list, because it's not a combat item. For 125 gold, you receive a nice boring painting of a noble person or some random relative or an unknown local celebrity. Hang this up in your hideout, and as long as you're within 500 feet of it, you can use an action and look through the eyes of a portrait and spy on any unwanted visitors. The eyes of the portrait follow the person around, and so they do get to make a DC 30 perception check to notice that. This is a great item for people who like to think ahead and set traps, especially if you're in like an intrigue style campaign. Just spread around some of the rumors, there's some valuable MacGuffin in your hideout, and then wait to see who comes to take the bait. If you let a local official know and then bring them in with you as you go to catch them, this is a great way to catch a villain right in the act. It does take a certain campaign to really take advantage of this, but it would be incredibly satisfying for players who are setting up this trap to actually catch somebody in it. I would definitely give the party something if they put in all the foresight in their work to make this happen. Basilisk Eye is another adornment for your shield. If you use your shield to block, you can activate this and then use the talisman to force the person to make a DC 25 fort save or become slowed 1. Actions are your most important resource here, and anything that takes away from them is going to be a big problem. Some creatures have very powerful 3-action abilities, and even forcing them to choose between using a 2-action ability or a strike and a move is going to restrict them. As a GM, I'm always looking at the skills that a creature has so that I can possibly trip, demoralize, grab, or anything else to a PC so I can weaken them up for my next move, which is likely to be some 2-action ability. For instance, a creature like a Chul wants to strike you, grab you, and then transfer you into its tentacles to expose you to its paralyzing poison. Its action usage is very clear from its stat block. If it doesn't have the actions to transfer you, then that's a round where you're just grabbed, and then on your turn you can attempt to escape. A caster with only 2 actions is not going to be able to cast Shield. There's 1,000 ways that less actions is going to be able to benefit you, so take a look at this one. Bralani Breath, which is definitely not Bralani Breath, which, although eating a delicious rice dish might leave you with pleasant breath, I don't know, I'm pretty hungry. Either which way, this is one for you casters out there. After eating this mint and flowers, if you cast Mage Armor, then you can force the creatures around you to succeed a DC Fortitude save, with the DC being your spell DC, or get pushed up to 10 feet away, 5 feet if they're huge creatures. There is a third level version of this as well if you need it. If you're a spellcaster, shoving is probably not part of your regular repertoire, so being able to make space is going to be very valuable when your GM rushes his creatures at you. Sure, you can step, but at this level, if you can push most creatures 10 feet, that lets you use that action to stride instead. I do think that the higher level version of this one is the way to go. I think this is the one you're going to want to really use. This is especially nice against creatures that have reach, as if you push them 10 feet back, you'd be able to get out of there with a stride instead of a step. This may feel like a lot of actions just to get away, but not getting all slam-a-whammed is going to lead to a lot more turns with your current character alive rather than not. And that's it. Levels 7 through 9 of some awesome consumables that you can add to your next session. I'll be back with another installment of this and other things soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you like what you saw and you want to join a campaign with me, check me out over at startplaying.com or over at my Discord too. I also have a Patreon as well if you'd like to support me. All the links for that stuff is below. As always, please hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to see what I'm coming up next. Let me know what other things you'd like me to cover, as I really appreciate the support that I've gotten for this series. I'll see you next time. This has been the Game Master.